Our first commentary will be by Charles Lee. He's a managing director and global head of equity research at Barclay's Global Investors. Please join me in welcoming Charles.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity to address this august group, particularly on this topic, forecasting earnings. I have just a few quick remarks. When I came to look at Geron's presentation and also just the topic in general, I felt a little bit like yesterday going to dinner. There's this massive buffet of good stuff, but you almost feel like there's no way that you can sensibly eat it all in one setting. So what I'm going to do is just selectively pick certain things out of the things that were brought up by Geron to sort of talk a little bit about what I learned and what I really wish I could learn. And also to contextualize a little bit how the exercise of forecasting earnings is related to sort of the broader context, the broader mandate for this conference, which is financial statement analysis. Okay, so what I learned, well, first one is I should hire Doron. So, sorry, Steve, just kidding. So it's much easier to try to digest all the stuff than try to digest all the stuff in his talk is to hire him. So the second thing is next time he presents, give him more time. Because I think there's really a lot of stuff. I think the material is really very relevant. On the other hand, it's just very difficult to get it all into one place. The talk is almost like an adolescent. It's still growing. In fact, the last couple of days we were exchanging. It's still, and I think that's because it's a reflection of how much stuff is done in this area, and a lot of good stuff. But it's a little harder sometimes to see, the thematics coming out of this literature. And the last thing I learned is I should keep this short because you're standing between Doron and Richard Sloan. I should just get up and put up and shut up real fast. So let me go real fast. The first a broad perspective on financial statement analysis. I love financial statement analysis. I think it's one of the most vibrant areas for research, not only in accounting, but just in financial economics in general. And the way I think about financial statement analysis is we're studying things that people care about as a function of financial statement items and other stuff. And so just economic outcomes of consequence. What are they? Well, stock returns, that's usually something people care about. Changes in risk, like credit spreads in particular, but lots of different changes in risk. But there's an enormous set of stuff that people care about where potentially financial statements have something to comment on. Bankruptcies, probability of fraud, corporate actions, analyst revisions, index memberships, implied vol, delistings, cost of capital, executive comp. They're all things, economic outcomes that people care about. And I find it sort of a bit of a charge to think about these things and how accounting helps you predict them. Future earnings is one of those. But as I mentioned, it's just you should contextualize it in terms of all the other things that you do as a financial statement analysis, if you're interested in financial statement analysis. The first thing I'd observe is I particularly like the forecasting aspect of it. When I is greater than 0, that is, you care about something that's happening in the future, it just gets more interesting. And the second thing is these are economic outcomes. They're not necessarily accounting things. So you can argue about whether this is accounting research or not, but it's helpful to think, I think, in terms of the broader economic context when we do this sort of research. The other comment I'd make is that functional form is important. This is where theory comes in. The theory tells you a little bit, either it's valuation theory, agency theory, or other types of theory. It gives you a sense of how you can use the accounting. And it turns out, I think, that's where the biggest comparative advantage is for this group, and potentially what you can add to your students the most. Because oftentimes that theory, or that it doesn't, and I use theory in a small t, right? This is not necessarily in Greek. But that theory, that process is often contextual. It's based on accounting knowledge and awareness of economic insights that come because you understand both the ingredients you're cooking with, namely all the different herbs and stuff that the accountant understands, pieces that are coming out of the financial statements, and also what you're trying to achieve. And to me, that is actually a big part of what makes financial statement analysis interesting. Other stuff is also important. I love the fact that this is an interdisciplinary process. There are very few interesting problems in the world that's solved entirely by accounting numbers or stuff that come out of financial statements. And that's a good thing, because it means that you got to sort of think about things from other disciplines that allow you to solve the problem, because you're driven largely by the problem and not driven just by what you pull out of the financial statements. So I like this. I like this as an area of research, and it gets me excited. On earnings forecasting in particular, I guess the first question I have, big picture question, is why earnings? Why do you want to forecast earnings, and particularly next quarter's earnings? Well, one reason is because it's there, it's objective, it's available, and others seem to care about it. On the other hand, it's not necessarily the right target variable, depending on what you really care about, your decision. Do you care about returns? Do you care about something else? So if you care about earnings, is not going to capture all the change in firm value over a particular period. We know that. If you really care about that, maybe you should be forecasting something like changes in analyst revisions, or something like the change in value measure in Liu and Thomas, or something like that. Seems like a sensible thing to do. Next period's earnings is likely to be related to what I truly care about, but maybe we can specify something more interesting as a target variable. The bigger question is, what is the economic decision of most interest? And that's related to the question of what earnings. Should it be operating? Should it be core? Should it be comprehensive? It really is related to what you're trying to do with this whole exercise, what the decision is. Should it be scaled, and should it be profitability, and why? Now, on earnings forecast, I just want to focus on one thing in the presentation that Jaron made, which I liked a lot. So this is the only piece I clipped out. I like the way this decomposition that he laid out worked. I hadn't seen it before. On the one hand, you've got the earnings surprise. On the other hand, you've got some things that are more related to what we typically do in financial statement analysis. And if you sort of look at it, stare at it a little bit, you see, okay, this part is the earnings surprise, and this part is essentially the change in ROE times the existing capital base in the previous year, the beginning of the previous year. And this piece right here is the return, the ROE on the new investment, if you will. It's the ROE in year T times the change in book value in the previous year. That's kind of a nice decomposition. If you sort of look at it from a sort of a timeline, the first piece is the top, so the beginning of the book times the change in ROE, and the second piece is sort of what your new investment or a change in book earned you. You can also decompose this further into the typical DuPont thing and ask yourself, well, see, it's sort of the question is, where does the surprise come from? To what extent does the different components of surprise help you understand what's going on? Recently, there's a paper that sort of looks at this, but it would have been very nice to have had this format laid out so you can kind of link what we're doing in two literatures. So what are the economic drivers of this surprise, and what do market participants know about it? Just a few other things, and I'm getting near the end here. Deeper contextual analysis is a very useful thing. There is really a need to fill the gap between large sample, one-size-fits-all studies and single firm analysis, which tends to be what we see here, a bottom-up and a top-down approach. But there is a lot that we do that we would love to see more sort of thematic understandings that actually embed some of the economics of industries. I mean, fundamental analysis, if you really want to do it sort of well and carefully, does require you to sort of to dig a little deeper into the individual industries, to understand the economic drivers, the sources of competitive advantage and risk, and how they're reflected in the financials. So I think that would be a useful area to think about more broadly. Looking ahead, I think financial statement analysis is cool. I think it's a vibrant pursuit with lots of applications and many more opportunities. But I really think the main thing is we need to maintain perspective and contextualize the exercise in the broader context of information economics. Use the accounting and not be shackled by it. So,
thank you.